You usually step into learning a new language with the expectation that it's going to be sort of like building a piece of flat pack furniture.
Oh, yeah, like you've got your instructions and your pieces scattered everywhere.
Right. You sit down with this really dense manual, which represents your grammar textbook, I guess, and you unpack a plastic bag full of disconnected little parts.
Which is your vocabulary list.
Exactly. And you hold this tiny Allen wrench, just trying to mechanically force tab A into slot B, hoping that if you just follow the rigid instructions, a functional sentence will magically appear out of nowhere.
And the traditional classroom model heavily reinforces that exact mechanical approach. I mean, it treats language as a static puzzle, something to be solved through, strict categorization and rule memorization.
But then you actually step into a real-world environment. Like you try to order a coffee from a native speaker, and suddenly you realize nobody is building furniture.
They're dancing.
Yes, they are dancing. The rhythm is fast, the rules are bending, and you're just standing there holding an Allen wrench, completely paralyzed.
It's terrifying. And that paralysis, that is the ultimate gap between academic language study and actual human communication. It's the friction between knowing the mechanics of a language on paper and actually being able to wield it in the wild.
Well, welcome to today's deep dive, and specifically, welcome to you, the listener, who we're affectionately calling the learner today, because you brought this exact tension to our attention.
You really do.
You sent us a very clear, very direct mission for this session. You literally said, quote, "I need an explanation about the course," unquote. And we are going to deliver exactly that.
And the materials you provided to help us answer that prompt are incredibly rich. We're looking at a specific language program called Ceress Basic.
Right.
But rather than just handing us some boring marketing brochure, you gave us a window into the mind of the creator. We have this really comprehensive transcript of a deep, cross-cultural interview between the course's founder, Emanoel Ceress, and a highly specialized Chinese linguist named Miss Liu.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We aren't just going to read a syllabus here. We are going to explore the architecture of this specific course, but more importantly, we're going to examine the underlying psychology of why certain educational methods fail while others succeed.
Yeah, we'll be jumping from the practical challenges of learning English in Brazil all the way to the high-stakes environment of teaching Mandarin to diplomats in Beijing.
It's quite a trip. So to properly explain the course to you, to the learner, we have to start with its structural blueprint, right?
Absolutely. So Ceress Basic operates out of Brazil. It's currently managing a student body of over 500 individuals.
Wow, 500.
Yeah, and it's supported by a small, dedicated team of teachers. The creator, Manuel, he brings a really unique generational perspective to the project. He actually jokes in the interview that he is 25 years old, but has somehow managed to spend over 20 years in the classroom.
So he definitely has the miles on the odometer.
Oh, for sure.
And his format reflects a very modern understanding of how busy adults operate today. The course is entirely online, and it's built on a model of lifetime access.
Right. The core philosophy there is removing geographical and temporal friction, letting students study anywhere, at any time, without being tethered to a physical desk.
But the true differentiator, the thing that really stands out, is the origin of the material. Like, Emmanuel bypassed the traditional method of recording sterile audio in some local studio.
Yeah, the lessons for Ceress Basic were recorded directly on location in the United States.
Which is huge. The curriculum completely abandons that abstract academic approach. It hyper-focuses on daily survival. Essential phrases for travel, vocabulary for navigating a new workplace, or managing studies abroad.
It's intensely practical.
Right. It folds simple grammar directly into real U.S. pronunciation and practical cultural tips, rather than treating them as these separate, isolated subjects.
And by recording on location and prioritizing that situational survival over abstract perfection, the course is attempting to provide what linguists call authentic contact.
Authentic contact.
Okay.
Unpack that for us.
Well, the human brain really struggles to retain isolated data points, like a random vocabulary word on a blank page. But when that word is tied to an episodic memory, say a specific street corner in New York, or a real interaction at a coffee shop, the brain anchors it.
It hooks onto it.
Exactly. The course is structurally designed for immediate contextual utility.
So it functions much more like having a local tour guide in your pocket than lugging around a dusty encyclopedia.
That's a great way to put it.
I mean, if you are preparing for a trip to a foreign country, Reading a 500-page historical textbook about their agricultural exports is not going to help you find a taxi at the airport.
No, you'll be stranded.
Right, you need someone on the ground saying, hey, here is the exact phrase you need for the train, and whatever you do not use this hand gesture.
Yes, the cultural tips are just as vital as the vocabulary.
So that immediate practical application is the engine driving Ceress Basic. But understanding the architecture of Emanoel's course is really only half the equation here.
True. To grasp why he leans so heavily into practical immersion, we have to examine his conversation with Miss Leo. It offers a completely different, yet somehow parallel, perspective on language education.
And Miss Leo's operating environment is intense. She's a teacher based in the embassy area of Beijing. She isn't dealing with tourists trying to order a beer.
No, not at all.
She teaches Chinese as a foreign language to diplomats. These are professionals navigating incredibly delicate geopolitical waters, where a misunderstood nuance could literally cause a minor international incident.
Exactly. And because of the high-stakes nature of her students' work, her classroom dynamic is the complete antithesis of those massive rote-learning university lecture halls that a lot of foreigners experience when they go to China.
Right? It can't be one size fits all.
No. Her environment requires hyper-individualization. She conducts flexible, face-to-face, or very small group sessions, constantly attempting to the specific communication needs of these political emissaries.
And what's wild is that she's doing this highly individualized work within a massive, highly standardized national framework.
Yes, the contrast is fascinating.
She outlines how rigorous mainland China is about linguistic uniformity. In her school and across the entire public sphere, the strict standard is Mandarin, paired exclusively with simplified characters.
Which makes sense when you think about it. That standardization is a massive logistical undertaking for a country of that size.
Oh, completely.
And she points out a really fascinating historical divergence. While the mainland utilizes simplified characters, which was a reform pushed in the mid-20th century to boost literacy rates, regions like Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Macau still use traditional characters.
And Macau is particularly interesting there, right? Because its history as a Portuguese colony basically insulated it from those mainland strict reforms.
Yeah.
It just demonstrates how political boundaries physically shape the written word over centuries.
It really does.
Yeah.
But going back to the mainland, their standardized system is unapologetically rigid. If a foreigner wants to enroll in a Chinese university, having a Cambridge English certificate or some equivalent international credential offers absolutely zero leverage.
None. They are subjected to the HSK, which is the official Chinese proficiency test. And Miss Leo mentions they must hit level 5 or 6.
Which is incredibly hard.
Right, that requires a staggering command of thousands of specific characters.
And this creates a fascinating dual reality in China. You have the official language infrastructure, standard Mandarin, which is required for commerce, for university testing, for diplomacy. But Ms. Leo notes that when many Chinese citizens leave the public sphere and go home, they revert to highly distinct regional dialects with their grandparents.
Which raises a really tough question. Is that strict top-down enforcement of standard Mandarin a necessary evil? I mean, you have a nation of over 1 billion people. You obviously need a cohesive educational and economic machine to function.
Right, the logistics demand it.
But prioritizing that public utility seems to directly risk slowly suffocating the private cultural intimacy of those regional dialects. It basically forces individuals to constantly switch identities between the boardroom and the living room.
It is a profound pragmatic split. And we see that same pragmatism dominating how English is taught within China, too. The official school system relies on rigid, local standards that mirror the European CEFR framework.
That's the A1, A2, B1 grading system, right?
Exactly. It is highly systematic and easily measurable for national testing.
But the rigid school system clearly isn't enough on its own. Because at home, families are completely bypassing it.
They have to.
They plunge into global media immersion. They import Cambridge or American textbooks. They stream BBC and CNN. They put on German cartoons for their kids. They are actively hunting for that authentic contact that the public school system's mechanical grading just cannot provide.
And they're also looking toward the horizon of technology to bridge that gap. Both educators in the transcript spend time analyzing the disruptive potential of artificial intelligence.
Oh yeah, the AI discussion was super interesting.
Yes, right. They discuss tools like OpenAI and the DeepSeek model, not just as basic translation devices, but as dynamic conversational partners. Tools capable of simulating endless, low-stakes, immersive environments for students.
So there is this massive friction happening. The rigid A1, A2 testing system that Ms. Leo describes works perfectly for a government bureaucracy trying to grade millions of students. But it fundamentally clashes with how human biology is actually wired to absorb information.
And what's fascinating here is how Miss Leo brings this exact friction to light by referencing the theories of second language acquisition. Specifically, she nods to the work of Noam Chomsky.
Okay, the heavy hitter of linguistics.
The heaviest. She introduces the concept of the language acquisition device, or as they call it, the machine built into the human brain.
She uses a really striking visual for this. She says, imagine a baby born to parents from Africa or Iran or Germany, and that family lives in China. Genetics play absolutely no role in the child's linguistic development.
None at all.
The child's brain acts as a biological sponge, perfectly processing the ambient Chinese in their environment and synthesizing it as a flawless native language.
Because Chomsky's theory suggests that we are born with innate syntactic structures, the brain doesn't need to be taught how to process language. It only needs the raw data, the input, to fill those pre-existing slots.
So the child isn't sitting there memorizing grammar rules.
No, their subconscious is automatically recognizing patterns and internalizing them.
But then we reach adulthood, and we completely sabotage the machine. We sit in these sterile classrooms and try to learn a second language by running everything to the analytical prefrontal cortex.
We obsess over grammar formulas.
Right. We attempt to perfectly translate every thought from our native tongue before speaking a single word.
We shift from natural acquisition to conscious calculation. And the cognitive load of trying to perfectly translate a sentence while simultaneously remembering all the grammatical exceptions of a new language, it makes true fluid fluency nearly impossible.
It is the exact same psychological trap as trying to learn how to ride a bicycle by reading a physics textbook.
I love that analogy.
It's so true, though. You can spend months memorizing the formulas for gyroscopic precession and momentum. You can pass a written test on the mechanics of a bicycle with flying colors, but the second you sit on the seat, you will crash.
You're going down.
Because your analytical brain cannot process the micro adjustments required for balance in real time. You just have to let your body feel the movement and develop the muscle memory.
And returning to your prompt about Ceress Basic, this biological reality deeply validates the methodology Emanoel chose. By stepping out of the theoretical classroom and filming his modules in the United States, he is intentionally trying to bypass that analytical translation trap.
He is feeding the machine. He is providing the contextual environmental input that the subconscious brain actually craves, rather than forcing the student to memorize the physics textbook of English grammar.
Yeah, and if grammar is the physics of language, pronunciation is the art. And the conversation between Emanoel and Miss Leo uncovers a remarkably counterintuitive truth about how adults acquire a native accent.
Here is where it gets really interesting. Ms. Leo compares two distinct demographics within her diplomatic student body, her German students and her African students.
And the contrast is wild.
Totally. The German students are deeply analytical. They apply incredible discipline, memorizing all the rules and mastering the complex grammar of Mandarin.
Yet, despite their mechanical mastery, they consistently fail to grasp the authentic Chinese accent. Their pronunciation remains rigid and distinctly foreign.
But then Ms. Leo looks at a student like the UN worker from Uganda, a brilliant professional with a medical PhD. She and many other African students achieve a nearly flawless, native-sounding Chinese accent with a fraction of the mechanical effort.
Which sounds so unfair to the students studying grammar all night.
It does. But the explanation for this disparity has nothing to do with work ethic. It has everything to do with audio processing. German is a heavily consonant-driven language where intonation is generally used to convey emotion, right?
Right. But many African languages, particularly within the Niger-Congo family, are highly tonal.
And Mandarin is famously tonal. A single syllable can mean four completely different things depending on the pitch and contour of the speaker's voice.
Exactly. So because the African students already possess a neurological framework that treats melody as vital lexical data, their brains naturally catch the musicality of Mandarin. They don't have to analytically process the tones. They simply hear the song and sing it back.
That's beautiful. The students who obsess over the mathematical rules of the language hit a wall, while the students who surrender to the rhythm and treat the language like music achieve the precise fluency everyone else is chasing.
And the interview closes with a practical demonstration of this exact concept. Emanoel attempts to put the musical theory into practice, pronouncing "wan" and "which" is the Mandarin phrase for good night.
And he actually does remarkably well by focusing on the sound rather than the spelling.
Miss Leo gives him his flowers for the pronunciation, but she quickly grounds the conversation by pointing out that speaking is only one sensory challenge. Producing Chinese calligraphy, the physical, visual, motor skill of actually painting the characters, requires a completely different type of spatial memory and discipline.
Yeah, that's a whole other level of difficulty. So what does this all mean for you, the learner? We began with your mission to explain the course. On a practical level, Ceress Basic is an agile online curriculum recorded in the U.S., engineered to bypass sterile grammar drills and deliver immediate real-world utility for adults.
But the deeper revelation, pulled from the intersection of Emmanuel's design and Miss Leo's linguistic expertise, is that the effectiveness of any course relies on how you engage with it. The secret isn't tighter categorization. The secret is turning off the analytical translator in your head and turning the innate biological machine back on.
Because the underlying architecture of Chomsky's theory remains intact inside your mind. Whether you are attempting to refine your English for a corporate environment or starting from absolute zero with a tonal language like Mandarin, your brain is already built to decode the puzzle.
You simply have to submerge yourself in the authentic environment.
You have to stop staring at the Allen wrench and just listen to the music of the language, which leads to a rather profound technological paradox to leave you with today. We established that the brain perfectly mimics the accents and cadences of the environment it is submerged in.
Right, it absorbs the input it is given.
And both educators expressed deep enthusiasm for the impending wave of AI language tutors. Within a few years, millions of students might spend the majority of their immersion time not conversing with flawed, emotionally complex human beings, but with perfectly calibrated, artificially generated voices from models like DeepSeek.
A synthetic environment providing the primary linguistic input for a biological machine.
Exactly. So if the next generation's primary conversational partners are algorithms, how will that alter the evolutionary trajectory of our speech?
That's a huge question.
If we naturally sing the song we hear the most, will the rich, messy, historically burdened accents of human history eventually be smoothed out and replaced by the flawless, mathematically precise music of machines?
Wow.
It is a strange new dance we are inventing, and we are just learning the steps.